Hey everyone, Billiam here. Last prospector story of the Lost Lemon Creek Mine. And then we're going to get into chapter 2, 3, and 4, and 5. And that's when the story really takes off. But I think this is really important, this part of the story. This might be a longer video. That's okay, because that's the story. So, Aiku Skun and the Lost Lemon Mine. The final Lost Lemon Mine prospector story is certainly the least well known. It is based upon a fascinating tale that appeared in the Lethbridge Herald on January 5th in 1960. The newspaper article entailed Aiku Skun and the Lost Lemon Mine was written by a woman named Florence Crosing. Florence Crosing, in parentheses, Nee Gladstone, so a couple different names, I guess, was born in 1895 and lived in Pincer Creek area. She was married in 1915 to Ernest Crosing and settled in Coleman prior to 1924. I guess Ernest Crosing, he started the Coleman Company, made tents, all that sort of stuff. Anyways, she seemed to have lived her entire life in Crow's Nest Pass, where she raised a family of 4 daughters and 2 sons. It was reported that Florence Crosing was an excellent midwife, having first assisted in the delivery of a baby when she was only friggin' 12 years old. So babies delivering babies. Over the years, she helped at births of many residents of the Crow's Nest Pass. Miss Crosing had a remarkable knowledge of native medicine and herbal cures, a gift she attributed to her Plains Cree heritage. In the 1960s, Miss Crosing put her pen to paper and wrote many historical articles dealing with the early days and native folklore. Several of her stories were published and used by the CBC. So yeah, this video is going to have CBC in the title, just so you know. Got to get those views. Florence Crosing's mother obtained knowledge of the Lost Lemon Mine as a result of caring for a blood woman named Aiku Skun and her 11-year-old son. Aiku Skun claimed to have been with Lemon and his partner during their trip to the mine. It was very common for prospectors and trappers to have native wives. Other than the obvious benefits of companionship, these marriages took advantage of the native concept of extended family. A prospector married to a native wife could travel through her tribe's territory without fear of an attack. Makes sense. Okay, we'll blast through these other 2 pages here. What follows is based upon Florence Crosing's 1960 newspaper article, which contains information regarding Aiku Skun's travels that may help us to unravel the mystery and the location of the location of the Lost Lemon Mine. The story began on the Blood Reserve near Cardston, Alberta, when Jack Lemon, Crosing spelling, 2 M's, Jack Lemon, and his partner rode in to purchase supplies for a trip into the mountains. However, it seemed that in addition to the purchasing moccasins and pemmican, Lemon also bought a wife, Aiku Skun, or Cloudwalker. Ah, nice name, Cloudwalker. A widow with a small son of 11 years old was obtained in trade for 2 horses and Hudson's Bay Company blanket. The chief of the Bloods performed a marriage ceremony, and Lemon and Cloudwalker became man and wife according to blood custom. There was law in effect, and in those days that no white man was allowed to remain on the reserve after sundown. So Lemon and his party left to camp up the river. The next day, they went by the way of Lee's Lake, with Cloudwalker's young son riding in a pinto pony, and Lemon, his partner Cloudwalker, each leading a pack horse. They continued their trip until darkness overtook them. The country was extremely wild. Making few stops, they made their way into Livingston Range. Following little more than First Nations game trails, they wound their way deeper into the wilderness. At the foot of a low mountain, they came to a small clearing in a bush, where an unfinished cabin stood. After Cloudwalker prepared a traditional meal of bannock and pemmican for Lemon and his partner, she put up her painted teepee and your young son's buckskin tent, where they were to sleep. Lemon and his partner slept in the cabin where the food supplies were stored. There was much for Cloudwalker, and with the help there was much for Cloudwalker to do, and with the help of her son she chopped and packed firewood, smoked any deer meat that Lemon brought back to the camp, and performed all the cooking and camp duties. When there was time, she also sewed moccasins and other clothing for the miners. So, I don't know if it was those two miners, or I'm sure there was many more, but probably just for them two, Lemon and his partner. Lemon had dug a hole in the floor of the small cabin to hide his cache of gold. Each morning he would show Cloudwalker the buckskin poke that contained the dust. Then he would return the gold to a secret place and cover the hole with a buckskin water bag. Cloudwalker said that in the late spring, when food was running low, she was told to round up the horses. She built an enclosure from poles and brush and put up the 3 horses she had captured into the corral. Later that evening, Lemon went over the small rise to look over the livestock. He was a pretty short guy, so he had to climb a hill so he could see over the backs of the cows. I think that's what that's saying. Once Lemon was out of sight, his partner went to the cabin, took the rifle, and headed off into the bush after him. Several minutes later, Cloudwalker heard a shot from the darkness. Then all was silent. A short time later, Lemon's partner returned alone and demanded his supper. He also wanted Cloudwalker to boil up the rest of the deer meat and pack it with the bannock. He said he'd planned to leave early in the morning, and that Cloudwalker and her son should wait until his return. Fearing the worst, Cloudwalker glanced off into the dark trees toward the horse corral. Her husband still had not returned. "He's not coming back," Lemon's partner said, as he hit Cloudwalker across the face. Then, after he had finished his meal, he ransacked the cabin looking for the hidden gold. Son of a bitch. Fearing for the safety of her young son, Cloudwalker told the boy to take a plate of food and a blanket from his tent and hide in the bush until she called him for him the next day. Only when he was safely out of sight did she return to her teepee. Taking a blanket to ward off the night chill, she sought refuge under a rock ledge near the creek. Ooh. Cloudwalker could hear the miner calling her in the darkness until well after midnight. Much later that night, she summoned up enough courage to creep to the place where her husband had been slain. Sitting on the ground next to the cold body of her white man, she kept a death vigil until dawn. Aikuskan, or Cloudwalker, knew that the miner would not hesitate to kill her and her young son or leave them with no horses or supplies to die of starvation in the wilderness. Her mind was clear. She knew what she had to do. So, this story so far is like she was actually with Lemon and his partner when all this shit went down. So, kind of crazy. By the first light of dawn, she whispered to her dead husband, "I will avenge you." A short time later, she returned to the camp, started a small fire, made a breakfast of boiled meat and bannock. When the miner awoke, he came to her fire and asked her for the bag of food. Cloudwalker pointed toward a stump and served him his breakfast. Then she put her plan into action. Smart. While the murderer sat with his back to the smoking fire, she silently took the splitting axe from where it had been propped up against the roots of a pine, summoning all her strength. She raised the heavy axe over her head, and with all the force she could muster, brought it down and smashed the miner's skull. He fell forward, thrashing for a moment or two, until he lay still by the smoldering fire. When Cloudwalker was sure that he was dead, she called to her son, and together they pulled Lemon's body to the diggings on a blanket. I thought, oh, okay. This is Lemon, not his partner, that they're talking about this second part. So they pulled Lemon's body to the diggings on a blanket. Carefully, they placed the bags of gold on Lemon's chest, keeping only a small handful of the gold, then covered the body with a pile of brush. Loading their food and supplies on a pack horse, they left the camp with Cloudwalker riding a second horse and her son riding his pinto pony. Silently, they headed high into the mountains in a westerly direction. So they're coming this way. About a mile into the bush, Cloudwalker tethered the horses and, leaving her son to watch them, made her way back to the cabin. As she walked through the camp on her way to the diggings, she passed the cold campfire and the silent body of the murdered miner. When Cloudwalker reached the diggings, her heart was broken and bitter. Standing near the body of the man she had learned to love and respect, she vowed that he would have his gold in the happy hunting ground. She then placed a curse on the diggings so that no white man could take the gold that had belonged to her Monias. White man, right? Monias. The curse, excuse me, that's itchy. The curse would drive men insane or cause them to die a horrible death in the wilderness. Only when her husband's spirit was at peace and his bones had crumbled to dust would a man with First Nations blood find the gold. Cloudwalker's plan was simple. She placed some of the miner's blasting powder under a rock ledge over the diggings. When this was done, she lit the fuse and ran as quickly as she could into the bush. Several minutes later, she felt the earth heave and roll as a rock slide swept over the diggings and the camp bearing Lemon and his gold. That night, Cloudwalker and her son made a cold camp. The following day, the clouds opened and it began to rain, continuing for days. The trail was wild and bush-tangled. Many times Cloudwalker had to stop to cut a path through the dense thickets. Traveling through the strange country, she lost her bearings. Cloudwalker and her son were now trying to head toward the south. They came to a river and had to swim their horses across the swollen stream. On another day, a grizzly bear caused the pack horse to break his lead rope and gallop, panic-stricken, along the trail. After calming the remaining horses, they traveled only a short distance before making a small camp. Then they spent several days in a futile search for the missing pack horse. Perhaps in its panic, it had lost its footing on slippery rocks and plunged over the cliff into the dark forest below. Crazy. Regardless of what had happened, they had lost all their supplies. The only piece of gear remaining after this disaster was Cloudwalker's rifle. Unfortunately, most of the bullets had been on the missing pack horse, and Cloudwalker was down to only 5. They continued on in the rain, cold, starving, and miserable, and came to a raging river. The stream was in full flood, carrying trees and clumps of brush in its boiling current. Unable to cross, Cloudwalker and her son made camp just about where the town of Sparwood is today. Sparwood. Remember that, BC people. Sparwood. Just when everything seemed bleak, their luck began to change. Cloudwalker managed to kill a small deer, and the little carcass provided some nourishment for the pair. After 3 days, the rain stopped, and Cloudwalker knew they must attempt a crossing of the river. To stay would surely mean starvation. Tying her son's feet under the belly of his pony with a piece of rope, Cloudwalker mounted her horse and made herself ready. The frightened horses hesitated at the water's edge before being lashed into the foaming river. With her son yelling a war whoop, and Cloudwalker answered with a blood war chant, they were swept along in the powerful current. They were carried some distance downstream before their exhausted horses were able to struggle up the muddy bank on the opposite shore. Wet, tired. They made camp there for the night. That's an all-day affair. The following day, they made their way across the mountains and over the summit of the Crow's Nest Pass. So they're in BC now at this point, or at least on the west side of the Rockies. Eventually reaching the place where the town of Coleman, Alberta is today, they made camp there and spent the night in a small teepee in the trees. So maybe I was wrong. Maybe they went the other way east if they're in Alberta. Very strange. The next day, Cloudwalker and her son reached the home of Florence Crozing's mother, who was living where the Charlie Sartoris sawmill is presently located in Coleman. Charlie Sartoris sawmill. Okay. Although taken in and doctored by Florence's mother, it was some time before the pair were well enough to travel on to their reserve at Cardston. 3 years later, Cloudwalker and her son returned to Coleman to thank Florence's mother for saving their lives. Cloudwalker brought gifts of beaded goods and asked Florence's mother to accompany her to the diggings. She wished to receive an HBC axe that Lemon had given her. The following morning, a small party consisting of Cloudwalker, several bloods from the reserve, Florence, her mother, and her little sister set out. That night, they made camp near a small island in the Livingstone River. The next morning, Florence and her little sister were left in the care of a woman from the reserve, while her mother, Cloudwalker, and 5 braves went on to the diggings. Florence concludes. Conclusion. When we awoke the next morning, they were all back, without the axe. Everything had been covered with an avalanche, except a few stumps where the women used to chop down trees. I only know part of the way. As far as I know, my mother was the only outsider who knew the way to Lemon Mine, which is still much sought after with its treasures of gold. It is quite easy to assign an approximate year to this account of the Lost Lemon Mine, because of its matter of record that Florence Crozing was born in 1895. As Florence claimed to have remembered the trip, it seemed unlikely that she would have been younger than 3 or 4 years old. This indicates the trip took place around the turn of the century, or perhaps even in the late 1890s. This date is significantly later than the first newspaper accounts, but the tale of Cloudwalker, A. Skun, remains a fascinating addition to the lore of the Lost Lemon Mine. LLM, people, that's what we're reading about. And now we're on chapter 2, and I promise you, we're just going to rip through this. I'm going to put it on a playlist. You're going to be able to hear the whole story. This is, like, the first part, yeah, it's kind of a backstory. This is where it really just gets gnarly. And I hope you enjoyed this part, and I hope you enjoy all the videos that are coming up with this book. And we're going to choose a few more books together as a group as these videos continue on. So that's it for now. And this is Billiam signing off. So thanks for stopping by. Bye for now.